Hi there, and welcome to One Idea Away, not just a podcast, but a community and ongoing conversation meant to inspire and empower individuals to live more fully, deeply, and consciously. Let's jump into today's episode right now. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to One Idea Away. You know, it seems, and you certainly have heard this on this show more than once, is that we all have our stories. We have the different adversities and the challenges that we face in life. And at the same time, it's what do we do in the face of that adversity? What is it that it creates in us? How does it shape us? Because it's in those tougher moments of life that we really start to begin, what is it that matters most to us? What is it that we want to contribute to the world, and how do we want to make that happen? It's up to us to be brave, to be courageous, to then go out and create that life, to offer those contributions. And so to do so, we breathe, we step forward, and it never hurts to have a little faith. And so our guest today is Faith. It's Faith Hunter, D.C. and New York City-based yoga and meditation instructor. She's also a global traveler, a life stylist, sprinkled with, I love this, a dash of Louisiana charm. Faith began her lifelong love affair with yoga in the early 90s as a way to cope as her beloved brother Michael was dying from a complication related to AIDS. And it was through that meditation of mindfulness that Faith was able to release her fears and experience an awakening from within. It was from that day forward that she committed herself to sharing these practices with the world. Faith is the creator of Spiritually Fly, a life philosophy that celebrates every moment of life and uses yoga's tools of breath, movement, sound, and stillness in a fresh and modern way to encourage students to live an epic life on and off the mat. Faith also owns Embrace Yoga D.C, yoga training and community center that's located in Adams Morgan, a multicultural nest of Washington, D.C. And with that, Faith, thank you so much for joining us here on One Idea Away.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to chat.
Great. So one of the things I like to kick off with is, most usually, some interviewers wait till the very end to ask a question like this, but I like to do it right at the beginning. And it's just simply what's at the heart of kind of the idea, the message that you really want people to receive from the work, the contributions that you're putting out in the world?
Wow. I would probably say there are two major messages. Mm-hmm. The one that is probably the most important is love. Like everything that I do, that I strive for, that I live for is rooted in this place of love. And it doesn't matter if I'm creating online content, or I'm teaching a class, or I'm showing up for my family, or I'm walking my dog. It's like all of this comes back to this place of love. And then the second piece is kind of intertwined and connected to that. But if you're showing up in this place of love, you're open, you are seeing yourself fully and completely, and you are able to share and be fully present with people in a really, really powerful way. So that means that you can do your work a lot better. You can have better relationships. You can work through your own personal struggles, your challenges, and uncover uncover what's most powerful within you, and manage all of your stuff, that we have in our little bags. Yeah.
Outstanding. I'm going to enjoy getting into all of this. Let's kind of start with this though, is I do want people to hear a little bit of your background and of your story, because your story began pretty early for you, meaning back in the formative years when you were in Grambling, Louisiana. And so I was wondering if you could share a little bit of, that time with your family and what was going on that really ended up setting the stage for your next maybe 15, 20 years of experience.
Yeah. It's really powerful how our backgrounds and our formative years, as you shared, really impact our lives in a really powerful way. And sometimes we don't know it. Like when we're in it, it's not fully clear. Right. But then finally things start to unfold, and it's like, are you going to take that path that's really calling your heart? Or are you going to go into the path that people are telling you should do? So kind of the thing that happened was that both of my brothers, Michael and Mark, were diagnosed with HIV when they were both really young. I think I was probably around the age of 11 or 12 when they both found out, maybe a little bit younger, but we're all about 4 years apart. And both of my brothers are hemophiliacs. Michael has already passed now, but my younger brother is still alive. And both of them were hemophiliacs. So as a result of the HIV, AIDS, and blood contamination moment that happened in the early 80s, that's how they were infected with HIV. Mm-hmm. So growing up being smack dab in the middle of these two boys that already had serious medical issues as a result of their hemophilia, and now you're compounding this with HIV, and you live in the South, and you're African American. Like, it's like boom, 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 like stack. It was extremely challenging. And, I always applaud, and I think back, I'm like, holy crap, my parents were really resilient and really strong. And if I can even live up to an ounce of who they were and who they are, in my adulthood, in my lifetime, then I've done myself and the divine a great service. Like, I'm fully living up to my potential. If I can even match what my parents did during that time, because they raised the three of us as normal as they possibly could, what was normal for us.
Yep.
And all of that was it really based, and I think this is kind of where I received some of my perspective and outlook, is that they were always supportive, regardless of what my brothers and I did, as kids growing up in Louisiana, but always ensured that we were exposed to everything possible. So, both my parents, professionals, educated, did everything that they possibly could to keep us safe and secure, but also allowing us to explore, fall down, make mistakes, cry, scream. But at the same time, my dad would always say, your family is the most important thing. And when nothing else is right in the world, your family is there. And so that's kind of where I've received that is exactly where I should say I received my first connection and awareness to love and the power of it. But within the same mix, I was also very angry.
Absolutely.
So even though my parents were very loving and I had these amazing relationships with my brothers, I'm always honest about this. I was really angry with God. And so my mother was very religious. My dad wasn't so religious. He was much more of a spiritual kind of person. He hated church and organized religion. So they were kind of split in that area. But at the same time, it was like these universal principles that were always important. And I started to come back to that around my 20s. And that's kind of when I first went to my first yoga class. That's when I made my visit to my first yoga class. It was a Kundalini yoga class. It wasn't called Kundalini. It was just called yoga. And when I walked in, I was like, okay, this is odd and weird, but I'm going to stay because my friend is here. We committed to go together. And the breath work, the meditation, the movements that we were doing started to bubble up in me. And I wasn't one to typically cry in public, and I did. I was like, oh my God, I can't stop crying in this freaking yoga class, but then I kept going back, and I continued to show up. And what started to happen in the practice of yoga, as I learned later in my yoga life and journey, is that there's this concept called koshas. And the koshas are about peeling back the layers of who we are, from our physical, like really tangible body, and getting to the wisdom and the bliss, the little sweet part on the inside. And that's really what the practice did for me. It started to peel back the hard shell.
I'm glad you went there, because I was curious if you could, many individuals here that are listening, they've certainly, are aware of yoga. However, most of us, would picture yoga as the, ungodly contortions we put ourselves into, all, clad in spandex. And so what truly is yoga? Because it is so much more than just the physical component that is there.
Yeah. So the kind of going back to that concept of the koshas, it's like, we are humans, right? We're living in this physical body, but at the same time, we have this huge element of spiritual and soulfulness of who we are. And the practice of yoga is a complete piece, meaning it's the whole of who we are, right? It doesn't matter if you can put your foot behind your head or even if you show up on a yoga mat. Like we all have the capacity to be what I call yogis, because it comes to this place of, are you breathing with consciousness? Are you being present with fullness, right? Or are you allowing yourself to be open and experience everything that is sitting in front of you in the present moment, and think about what's next on how you can move and navigate through the world. So if you're living in this much more mindful awareness, conscious and vibrant way, you're a yogi. You're practicing yoga, right? The asana, right? The yoga postures are just a component to support us to get into that place. So when you show up on your yoga mat with your yoga pants and your spandex, right? And, the yoga teacher's telling you to move through that sun salutation. All she's doing or all he's doing is helping you peel back those layers, that physical piece, and help you get to the heart of who you are.
It's amazing when you're going through any of the number of the asanas, the movements that are there, what it is that you do truly connect to. And I'm curious if you could speak, because you just described so beautifully in your first yoga experience how you did start to tap into those deeper layers. And I'm just curious, as you peeled away, as you peeled down into those different layers, what was it that you feel you really truly connected to that just drew you in and said, this is where I need to be?
Yeah. It's really interesting because I think everyone feels and experiences this practice in a very, very different way. And some of us have some similar, connections. For me, it was really about, so sweet as I think about it, it was really about me returning to who I was when I was young. And I was vulnerable with and knowing that it was okay to be vulnerable, knowing it was okay to be scared sometimes, knowing it was okay to bask in, all the joy of like my brothers and I at play, or, my dad traveled a lot. And so it's like coming back to that moment when my dad shows up at home and we haven't seen him in 7 or 8 months, like, yeah! Right? That is, for me, is my sweetness, is my heart. Yeah. And the practice reminds me of that. The practice provides that same sensation of innocence.
It's interesting to me as we go through, as we're describing these different movements, and what comes up is that, I guess, two things. One is how much the different movements, the transitions even between the movements and asanas and everything else, the metaphors of what you're going through physically and how relevant those metaphors are to life. Those are some of the things I've taken away of just, that realization, oh man, this transition's so difficult. Oh yeah, transitions are difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
And into a much deeper sense. So I guess, for you, I'm just curious, what are some of those maybe bigger life lessons that you have drawn out of your yoga practice?
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful ones is to pause. I tell my friends a lot of times, and even some of my yoga students, I have a lot of fire. and that's, I get that from my mom. She's just like really feisty and just like a fiery woman. And I am like all that. I'm like so full of energy. But the practice reminds me to pause and be still. So in those poses when the teacher is saying, hold, we're going to be here for 5 to 10 breaths. And I'm like, oh crap. Right. And that shows up in my life. Like, it's like, I don't drive anymore. God forbid. I hate driving. But when I used to drive a lot, I would be that person on the road with the road rage, like, and I'm like, no, pause, enjoy this moment that the traffic is still, breathe, and you be still. Or in those moments when I'm feeling anxious, right? Or I'm triggered negatively by something, regardless if it's in the media or your friends or whatnot, random thing on the street. Again, pause. Is this your true reaction, right? Or is this fear bubbling up? Like really acknowledging that stillness, that moment of pause makes you think, right? And sometimes rethink what your reaction shall be.
So wondering if you could say a little bit more, because you've even used the phrase bubbling up just a couple of times. And I think it's interesting when I come at things, even though I do practice yoga, I predominantly am more aware of some of what you're talking about from a mindfulness and meditation type of practice. And when you are within that stillness, things do bubble up. And there is, it's kind of and I guess maybe the question is that for you, of when you find yourself within that stillness, what is it that you feel begins to emerge for you?
Yeah. When I'm in the stillness, if I'm in meditation, or even if I'm in my yoga class and, the teacher's saying, let's just hold down dog, or even I'm doing my own personal practice sometimes, because I do practice alone a lot. The thing that bubbles up, depending on where I am emotionally in that day, could be a variety of stuff. However, it's typically things I've already done, or stuff that's like sitting, a lot of times that's sitting heavy on my heart. And that stillness gives me an opportunity to reevaluate and assess where I am. It gives me that opportunity to rethink. And if I'm open, like I always say, so be open. If I'm open, sometimes the answers will show up. Yeah. If I'm really lucky, right? The answers to all my questions will, and it's, I say that lightly, but it's really true. Yeah. It starts to show up. It's like that pause, that stillness, the bubbling, when it comes to the top, we have the option to listen or push it away. Yeah. And when we listen, that's when the magic happens.
I just wanted to pause for a moment and do two things. First, I wanted to say thank you. So many of you have been sharing and starting your own conversations, adding reviews and ratings, and just been really a great group of listeners engaging in these conversations and moving them forward. Thank you, because that's why we do this. Secondly, for those of you that are not already getting in on the action, or for those that have started to engage but you haven't yet experienced that full access, I did want to invite you to join that. If you go over to oneideaaway.com/join, that's going to give you first access to our weekly conversations, as well as the exercises, reflections, even the online challenges that we're now rolling out. We had a member just the other day write in and tell us how a recent exercise we released helped her identify several new possibilities she didn't realize were right in front of her. It dropped her anxiety, dropped her concerns and her doubts, and she was able to create a brand new option from the ideas that were sparked. She's now completely comfortable and confident to move forward on what had been a really tough situation. That exercise, it came from inside access at the One Idea Away community, the newsletter, the private group, the ongoing interactions and practices and conversations that we share. So I hope that you're going to join in on the fun and use it to connect to the peace and the joy and the confidence and support that'll help you create and experience the life you desire. Again, just go over to oneideaaway.com/join. And I really look forward to connecting with you inside the community.
So let's keep going on this, because part of your story is this idea of awakening from within, and that's part of what you're now beginning to describe. So I was wondering if you could go even into a little bit more of what does it really mean to awaken from within?
Yeah. So for me, again, it really is about listening to the self, right? I feel like, myself included, yoga teachers, meditation instructors, powerful, inspirational people like yourself, like we're simply guides to support people on their journey. We're giving them tools and mechanisms and little techniques to tap inward. So if we are truly awakening from within, we're taking these tools, absorbing them, engaging them in a really powerful way, and allowing ourselves to be present and listen. Yeah. All of the answers, look at kind of coming back to that same statement earlier, all of the answers are within. And I honestly believe, like in my whole heart, that we are amazing, powerful, divine beings. Like we know what's true because that's our consciousness. That's our true self of knowing. That's our higher self. And a lot of times we get distracted by external forces, from our cell phones to the news, to Facebook, to Instagram, like all, all this stuff, to our friends, to our and sometimes even our family telling us who we are, what we're supposed to be, and how we're supposed to do it.
Well, and absolutely, and it's and those distractions even continue, because there is even the part internally of how much our minds can distract us from that deeper voice that you're describing right now. And I think, tying it back to where we began in terms of some of the core messages that that you want people to be able to see, to touch as a result of your work, is around that idea of openness. Right. And being open to the experience, and to be able to see what emerges, and to be able to see more clearly who we are, what's coming up for us, so that we can be present with ourselves, and then being present with others.
With others.
Right. And it's amazing when you are in that, going from the space of stillness and then coming at things from that openness, just how much what's bubbling up within, and that voice and that awakening that can come through when you are open.
Yeah.
So one of the other things before, because I do want to ask you very specifically about what does it mean to be spiritually fly, but just before we go there, one of the other elements that you raised before was this idea that when we're in our formative years, and I think that this what you raised actually goes even well beyond that, because I think it's something that follows us around for much of our life, is that idea of, do we follow the path that is calling your heart, or do we follow the path that is expected of us? And I think that's a really, 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 interesting frame. And so I'm curious for you, how have you done that? How have you recognized what your heart was calling, for? And then what did you do? What was it you tapped into to be able to follow just that?
Yeah, it's interesting, because growing up, and again, coming from parents that were educated and living in a college town, college was the path.
Right.
That was just like normal. Like that's what we did, right? And everything from myself to my brothers, all of us graduated from college. We all have master's degrees. My older brother, he was a doctor, so he ended up going to medical school and graduating from that. And my younger brother right now is finishing up his PhD. And, so as I look at what we were expected to do, that's what we were expected to do. We were expected to continue to become viable, reliable, responsible citizens of the world and educated, right? And then after that, of course, our parents want us to have great jobs and successful careers and, all of this wonderful stuff, which all of us did. Yeah. And for me, I'd already started practicing yoga. I started doing it, like I said, in the early 90s, and I was in grad school at the time. And that was my first kind of connection to this different sensation of what I could do with my physical body as well as my mental, like really linking those two together. And prior to that, I felt like it was very, very separate. For me, when it happened, it felt great. It felt good. And I was like, this is key. And then I started looking back 10 years after I'd already been practicing. This is way before I was a yoga teacher. I look back and I'm like, holy crap, yoga is the only thing that's consistent in my life other than my family, right?
Yep.
And I was influenced to become a yoga teacher because some of my friends were asking me, what's so different? Why, how are you dealing with all this stress at work? And I'm like, well, I go to yoga every day, right? I'm meditating, I'm doing my breath work when, the boss is like screaming at us, right? And so they were like, oh, do this. And then, oh, show me how you're doing this, right? And then I started sharing it with my friends. And I was working in healthcare. So I was working for a national nonprofit here in D.C. at the time. And we had national meetings and regional meetings, and I was one of the program managers and then directors for the national trainings. And I told my boss one day, I was like, we need to start bringing some mindfulness and some rest and rejuvenation. I mean, the people coming to our conferences are burnt out, right? And so he was like, well, okay, you need to teach it then. And I wasn't a yoga teacher. All I did was go to yoga. And that's all people knew, that faith. And this was way before yoga became popular, by the way. So then I started doing that, and I decided that I didn't want to work in nonprofit anymore. I myself was starting to get burnt out, and I moved to New York. No job, no nothing, but I had some money in savings, and my mom thought I was going crazy. My dad said, go and enjoy yourself, figure out what you want to do. Like, I just love how my parents were so different in their perspective. I think it kept us somewhat balanced. And I ended up going and spending 3 months looking for a job, but I think I mostly spent 3 months bouncing around the yoga studios and trying out all kinds of yoga. And I just fell in love with the perspective and the differences, because I really had only been exposed to really 1 to 2 major forms and styles of yoga. I mean, I said I started with Kundalini. And so I didn't know what else was really out there until I made it to New York and started just practicing all these different forms. And man, I was like, whoa, these teachers are awesome. I just love how they're doing this. And at one point in time, my younger brother was in grad school in Arkansas, and he was really ill. And my mom was like, I'm going to go and, take care of your brother, but I don't want him to drop out of school. He does need someone to take care of him. I was like, you know what? I need to get out of New York for a couple of months. So I ended up going to Arkansas, random Fayetteville. And I'm there, helping to take care of my brother, and while he's still trying to, stay in school and whatnot. And I start taking yoga there. And I start taking another style of yoga, Iyengar, with this amazing woman named Hamsa. And she was probably the single most influential yoga teacher that I'd ever had in my entire life. Her kindness, her sweetness, yet her powerful strength. And even now, like, I still, keep in touch. It's like her strength is, she's like, I think in her 70s now. It was just so amazing. And I think the other thing that brought us together was her connection to family. Yeah. And connecting with her and being so heavily influenced by her, I went back to New York and I told my mom, I'm enrolling in a yoga teacher training program. And by the way, I lost my job. And, it's like all these, because I managed to get some job and whatever. And I was like, I lost my job and the training is 4 months and I have no money and I only have enough for rent. And she's like, okay, I'll pay for teacher training. And my mother's like, well, I hope you're not becoming Buddhist. I think that was like her main concern, because she's, Baptist Christian. And I was like, no, Mom, I'm not becoming Buddhist, but I am becoming a yoga teacher. So that's what happened. Like, I didn't know that was going to be my path. I didn't know that any of that. And then after I graduated, my mother was like, well, I hope you figure out what you want to do, because honey, your money's gone and I don't want to have to give you cash. You're like 30 years old now. Pull it together, Faith.
It is amazing because, when we have that chance to reflect back on our journeys and our stories, we can kind of see that thread. Like you said, 10 years in, you look back and, what's the thing that's been central to all of this? Well, yoga's been the constant for you. And at the same time, it's really interesting because to me, it's almost one of those, for everybody out there, is to pay attention. Pay attention to what life is bringing you. Pay attention to what life is offering you. And for Faith, you, for whatever reason, decided, you know what? Let me get out of New York for a bit. Let me go to Fayetteville. And there it is. And so there's, it's amazing when we pay attention to life and we react to just some of these opportunities that come our way without maybe trying to overly, overthink them and figure them out. It's really amazing what the flow of life can offer to us in that regard.
Yeah. And it's really interesting that you said the pay attention and not force it, because I do yoga teacher trainings at my yoga studio in D.C. and I travel around and train other yoga teachers in collaboration with other organizations and businesses. And I find that in this day and age, because things are so quick and so fast happening, and with the influx of social media, everyone wants to be it now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I'm like, pace yourself. Like they're like, well, I need to get my branding and I need to find my voice and I need to do so that I can like post this on Instagram and I have my blog and I have my, I'm like, just pause. Like be a student, teach, because teaching as a yoga teacher, meditation, like that's a teaching practice within itself.
Yeah.
Give yourself time to be in that and then listen as things start to unfold. But if you force it and push it, it's never going to work out. Patience.
Yeah. You know, again, you just used a word there, and it's one that'll probably pass most by, and I just don't want it to, is a very simple word, listen. Because, right, when we get still, when we are in those spaces in between all of the happening that is going on, when we have that moment to just listen, to observe, to look around with our eyes wide open, our hearts wide open, it really is just amazing what's there for us if we slow down long enough to pay attention to it, to see it, right, to hear it. So one of the things I did want to, before we fully start to bring things around full circle, I've got to ask. I love the term spiritually fly. So that's a great phrase. I had to ask more of, tell me a little bit about what is spiritually fly, because you describe it as a life philosophy. And I wanted to understand more, because it's one of the things I'd love for more and more people out there to do, is to consciously create a life philosophy for yourself. So you really know what you believe, what you stand for, because it changes the way you can navigate life. So I'm curious, Faith, for your perspective of that spiritually fly philosophy.
Right. So the two words coming together was not my creation. I always like to give honor to one of my yoga students for doing this literally, like probably, oh my God, 10 years ago, I think. I'm like going, what? 10 years ago? 10 years ago. And it happened because as I shared earlier, I had this horrible relationship with God for a very, very long time. And therefore my level of spirituality and spiritual connection was very dormant for a while. Like I would probably say high school through sometime grad school, when I started opening back up again. And there were times where I didn't even want to go to church with my mom, where it's like, no, I'm staying home with dad, right? Forget that church business. And so spirituality was not a huge part of my life. And then all of a sudden, when I started opening back up, when I started reconnecting to who I was at the core, meaning that love-centered self, my alignment with God and my connection with the divine started to reopen. And I was like, there's a reason why I still, even though I hate it sometimes, right? I still enjoy when I visit my mom, going with her to church on Sunday, because that is something we always did when I was much younger, before I had my love-hate relationship with God, right? And I would always teach yoga when I was living in D.C. I started to teach yoga on Sunday mornings. It just felt good. It felt right. And one of my students comes up and she goes, it was this whole dialogue of her not being able to come to class on Sunday. And she had this strife with her pastor that said that he was missing her on Sunday, but she still wanted to go to yoga. And she's like, Faith, I just have to keep coming to yoga on Sundays because it's just this spiritually like natural flow and kind of fly kind of experience. And coming back to the listening, I was like, oh, spiritually fly. And then the spiritually fly class, I started calling it a class. It became a workshop. And then in the listening, I went through, and I share this in some other stories and interviews, but I went through an extremely, extremely traumatic and abusive relationship, which was, it ended probably like about 7 years ago. And during that time, I did a lot of home practice. I didn't practice with any other teachers. I only taught and did home practice and meditated a lot. And as a result of the listening, I was journaling. So I would come out of my meditation and write, come out of my meditation and write. And in those moments of writing, I started jotting down these different statements of what life was for me. And I was like, holy crap, this is my mantra. Spiritually fly is the lifestyle. These are my mantras. These are the things that are guiding me. This has nothing to do with yoga. It has everything to do with life. And I'm spiritually connected, and I have the ability to soar and expand and be my true self. And that fly is like, yes, I'm modern, I'm urban, right? But I also have massive wings, and I can fly and I can soar. But at the same, I'm still rooted to my spiritual essence. So
love that. And it's, again, I mean, you're even just the way that you describe everything and how you even ultimately came to some of those realizations just through the experiences you had gone through and the meditations and journaling that you were able to layer on at that point. For everyone to be able to take that time, to be able to, look at your life, look at your experiences, to be in that stillness, to listen very deeply for those lessons, that wisdom that happens to be there. And it's wisdom that's going to be unique to you and to your experience and what's meant to be there for your life, right?
Yeah.
And so I love that process. And I think it's a process I'd encourage everybody to kind of spend some time with, because you will just notice some just amazing things really within your life. Now, I did just, again, before we wrap up, there was one of those statements that I had heard that you made, and I can't not ask this. It's one of those statements was trust and have faith in yourself and others. And of course, something that might be straightforward to most, but I literally have faith on the line. So how can I not ask Faith about how do you approach having faith in yourself? Because you did take those leaps. You did take the leap to do the yoga training. You did take a leap at times that finances were not there for you. And you can only do that when you do have that faith in yourself and others. How did it work for you?
It's really challenging. I'm not going to lie. And it's scary, but it makes me think about being vulnerable. Yeah. And vulnerability is frightening. Vulnerability is uncomfortable. But I find that when we get the butterflies and when that aha moment pops up and it's feeling a little scary, your soul and your heart know that it's right. And you have the option to push it down and start speaking those negative words to yourself. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I don't have enough money. I can possibly do this. Or you can go, you know what? This is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I'm meant to do. This is scaring me. This is right. And it's knowing, like, it's kind of like the same feeling. Here's another one. When your gut feeling tells you, like when driving, going back to my weird driving, when my gut feeling says, you know what, I am not taking the path. Like there's something about, I'm not going to get in that car and I'm not going to go that direction. I'm going to decide to turn and go this way. Yeah. And then you hear on the news, car crash was on blah, 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 freeway today. And you're like, wow, that was my gut. Yeah. That was my way. So it's like when you get those sensations in your body, in your physical body, because again, the physical body and the spiritual body, we are connected, right? We are not these two separate entities bouncing around. When we plug in and blend them effortlessly together, then the messages will come, the feelings will come, the sensations and the knowing will show up. But we have to be open to listen. If we are, and this is kind of like one of those tools, if we are not giving ourselves time to pause, be in stillness, do the listening on the other end, meaning as a personal practice on a daily basis, even if it's 5 minutes of meditation every day, like that's all I have time. Like I know people that have kids, that's all they have time. If you're not giving yourself that opportunity to do that on the other end, when the message starts to come through, you won't hear it. Yeah. When the sensation starts to come through, you're not going to feel it because your body, your spiritual body is not even open to receive that. Yeah. It's already closed off and blocked. So that's how you know that you need to trust. And that's how you can, because you've done the work on one end. And when it starts to pour through you, you know that it's sitting right. And you're like, I'm doing this. This is where I need to go.
I love it. Faith, I want to thank you so much for coming on One Ideal Way and sharing so much of just who you are, the energy that you've got for what you do, and the wisdom that you bring.
Thank you so much. It was a joy to share with your audience.
Thank you. For everyone, I just to add just a tiny bit more there than to what Faith was talking about, is that when we get quiet, when we get still, when we begin to really truly listen, what I'd love for you to tune into is where that energy starts to rise from. Because when you listen, if you're hearing the story, if you're hearing the words that are there, chances are you're listening to your mind. I want you to listen deeper, get in touch with the vulnerability that's there, the emotion that's there. Listen deeply to really understand what is it you know, because when you tap into that, it's a completely different feeling. It's a resonance that you begin to feel. And it will guide you. It will guide you through all sorts of incredible decisions and paths and all sorts of wonderful things when you can tune into it. It'll bring all the brilliance and everything you do have in your mind, but it'll combine that with a deeper part of who you really truly are. And so I encourage you to take up those practices, try things out, and see how you can sink into that space. So everyone, as always, I want to thank you for dropping in on the show. And until next time, continue to enjoy the journey. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you really enjoyed it, do me a favor, let us know. You can keep the conversation going and send us a message on our Facebook page, which is simply One Idea Away. Go ahead and tag me in the post or even just direct messages. Also, I would be incredibly grateful if you could share this episode along with someone that you believe could benefit from hearing the ideas and the messages that we got into. That's pretty much why we do this. So you can just go ahead and share it from your app or email it along, whatever works for you. The point is to share, to talk, to discuss, and keep the dialogue going, because it's in those conversations that ideas can take hold and create profound shifts in perspective. That's what allows us to live life more fully, deeply, and consciously. As always, we would love to see you post a review for the podcast in iTunes or whichever app you're using. And until next time, remember, you're never more than one idea away from a whole new reality. This is Luke Iorio and One Idea Away, signing off.